And
Okay,
when
interesting,
you're
yeah.
freaking out about something and you know that that's all anyone else is seeing, you're like, you're aware of it, so everything everyone says is like, pointing out this thing that you're paranoid about that no one's really noticing. Asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share. Or I could just location share you and then we could
So talk to me about how sometimes you were even the intimacy coordinator in some of those scenes. Like we saw you.
That shouldn't be happening, by the way. I just want to be clear that you should not be the intimacy coordinator. You should definitely hire intimacy coordinators, which we did have.
Well,
thank
you
goodness.
were teaching Justin how to pull you in.
Where have you seen that?
That
I
clip.
actually just saw it too. It was really?
Justin Baldoni was apparently so terrified of Blake Lively and how she would spin things, twist situations, and convolute narratives that in an email he sent in December 2023, before they even got back together to film, Justin was terrified that any scenes he filmed with Blake would be taken out of context and used against him, based on her behavior up to that point. This email is part of the evidence he sent to the entire team in December 2023. It's like he could see the writing on the wall and knew what was coming because he had already been engulfed in her behavior for months. What's interesting here is that Blake seemed to have a lot of complaints throughout this process, and these complaints were repeatedly used as leverage for her to get things. I kept thinking to myself, if I really had a serious concern about something happening in the workplace, if I were fearful of being on set and uncomfortable with the behavior, I wouldn't use what I felt was a serious issue as a tool to get access to things. I certainly wouldn't leverage it by saying, if you don't give me this, I'll expose this. Because honestly, if something bad had truly happened to me, it shouldn't be something I weaponize or use as extortion. If you were truly a victim, you'd make the report and stop threatening to release it. If it was real. If you weren't a victim, you might fabricate a story and then weaponize it, threatening someone that if they don't do what you want, you'll say this happened. I'm a survivor of SA, and I'll say I've never seen anyone do what Blake has done. But guess what? Everyone on the internet thinks she's like Amber Heard 2.0. Now, I want to dive into something I noticed in the evidence file that his attorneys filed in court. I don't know if this evidence exhibit will stand. I know there was discussion yesterday in court that it might get restricted because the judge had questions about its value, but I noticed something. They were on strike during the writers' strike and the actors' strike in 2023. I noticed a note from October 17, 2023, as the strike was ending. Over the summer, Blake was obsessed with seeing the dailies. She wanted to see the footage, wanted to see what the movie looked like. I can't speculate why she wanted to see the dailies. There are a lot of theories. But instead of digging into speculation, I want to stick to the facts. Over the summer, she kept asking to see the scenes, wanting some level of control, wanting to do some editing. But on October 17th, her agent reached out to Jamie Heath, one of the producers, with a request that I think is wild. The epitome of entitlement. Like, you don't even consider that other people have lives. The document says Lively's agent and manager reached out to Heath, requesting that Baldoni fly to New York to show Lively the assembly cut of the film. Heath responded that Baldoni wasn't available to travel at the time but looked forward to showing her the rough cut when they resumed production shortly. The text message says, Blake would like to see the cut this week if possible. Hate to make him fly out, but if that's how he'd like to do it, she gets it. I assume he's just going to intro it awkwardly. Otherwise, we'll write Jamie too. Let me know how best to coordinate. Jamie Heath responds, hey, the end of your text said, we'll write Jamie too, but I'm here. Did you mean someone else? The agent responded, she suggested he'd be down to do it this week, so I asked Blake if that would work. Jamie Heath responded, let me check on that. Not sure why or what she's referring to. Maybe she had to come. I wasn't part of it. Let me look into this and see what's possible. The agent says, thanks. They're talking about someone whose name is blacked out. I think that's the agent's name. Later that day at 6:18 p.m., Jamie responds, hey, Justin is very much looking forward to sharing the rough cut with blank in person. As mentioned, he has not nor will be sending any links as he's still in his director's cut. He's 4 weeks in and breaking until we've concluded shooting. He's not available to fly here as of now. The plan has been, once we get to Jersey and we're prepping for our shoot, he'd take a segment of a day to have Blake join him in the screening room, where he can work her through the cut. This has been the only way he's shown it to anyone. So much is missing and there are placeholders. It requires his real-time input while viewing. So quite simply, the plan is once we arrive in Jersey, he will share. If we don't make it due to the strike, then once we deal with that, we can revisit and figure out a path to share. I'm sure you get it. We all know by now there was some concern that Blake was going to be sharing cuts. We've already seen her admit when she was at Colleen Hoover's book Bonanza that she took a part of the film with her, on a hard drive, when the studio said no. And he's saying, listen, I'll show it to you, but we need to show it to you here. He can't make it, it won't work for him. Once we get back together, she can see it, but there's still a lot missing. Placeholders, place cards. They're blah blah blah, so understandable. I worked on a documentary. I know what it's like to see a rough cut with place cards. It doesn't look anything like what the film will eventually look like. Frankly, why she wanted to see it this early when they hadn't even filmed a lot of her and Justin yet, or her scenes, makes me feel kind of weird. But again, on November 8th, it says in anticipation of the SAG strike ending soon, Heath reached out to her representative and shared the shooting schedule, which was set to resume on November 15th. So he reached out to her lawyers on November 9th about getting aligned, informing her that production was on the ground in New Jersey and eager to get started. On November 9th, they sent an email that said, "Long time no speak. I hope you're well. As you might know, we are back in Jersey prepping for the last 2 weeks, hoping that the strike would end, and here we are with that. I'd love to have a chat with you about moving forward and getting aligned the best we can at this stage. Can you please give me a ring?" So, if you remember, they said no to her. No, you're not going to see the rough cut. Then suddenly, on November 9th, and by the way, there were no concerns about this on-set behavior, they get this letter from her attorneys, basically outlining all these things she claims happened to her on set. And I'm like, okay, but you just got told no about seeing the footage, and now you're saying, I'm not going to come back unless you bend to my demands. Seems a little suspect. So, they have to negotiate back and forth, lawyers get involved, blah blah blah. I don't want to get too deep into that. Something I saw that stood out to me is that after they finally get through the process and she agrees. And by the way, this takes them such a long time and it's so hard for them to negotiate this with her. They don't start filming until January. They were ready to go in November and she didn't start filming until January. They bent over backwards so much for this woman. It's wild. And honestly, the production cost for this film was, for Hollywood, $25 million isn't a lot of money. I wouldn't say it's low budget, but I wouldn't say it's blockbuster budget either. You know, big movies can cost $300 to $400 million. $25 million is pretty skeleton. It's estimated that Blake was paid $3 million, so she's getting almost 20% of the total budget. $3 million isn't a lot of money for an actress these days. And some of the actors, like young Blake Isabella, reportedly made less than that. $3 million isn't Talatoff money for an actress these days, and Semyoff Victors, like young Blake Isabella, reportedly made less than $100,000 for her portrayal of young Lily in the movie. So this wasn't a huge budget film. And in filmmaking, it's all dollars and days. The longer you delay things, the more money you're spending. If you don't have a lot of money, budgets go out of control. They had to deal with so many delays and demands from her, from scheduling to everything else. By the end of December, they finally got everything sorted out. But here's what they framed it as, and it's so chilling if you think about where we are today. On December 27, 2023, Boni emailed his team of producers with notes on his revised script, expressing sadness and frustration over Lively's takeover of a film they spent years developing, writing, and funding. Having no energy left to fight, he reluctantly declared he was waving the white flag and submitting, saying he'd give Lively 98% of what she wanted. He also conveyed serious concerns over handling the intimate scenes, given the accusations inherent in Lively's return to production. Baldoni asked his production partners for guidance, stating he was rightfully afraid that something innocuous or not to her standards would likely be used against him, as it already had been. He said creativity is impossible in an environment shrouded in fear. A producer responded, thanking him for his thoughtful breakdown, especially considering the circumstances. And here's the thing. In her list of demands, she was using the fact that there was quote-unquote unprofessional behavior on set as a means to get her own producer to get more control. Kind of felt like, if you're very serious about this, why would you need all of these things outside of making sure the workplace is safe, right? And they already did that. But then she's using it as leverage to get more control. More creative control, more production control. She leveraged these allegations to get control, and in order to get her back on set, they gave in because she said she would quit. It would have cost them millions of dollars to hire someone new and start over. And again, time is money, and this wasn't a big budget film. Here's the email he sent after they finally figured things out with her. Attached is a revised script with the below notes, caveats, and bold. This is not final, as there are things we need to discuss and implement. Also, I added, blacked out name. An AD here to have eyes on this so they can digest it at the same time as all of you. I spent the better part of the last few days trying to figure this out. Everyone knows how I feel about all of this and how angry I am that Blake has taken over our film and somehow rewrote a movie we spent years developing, writing, and funding. Yes, I'm furious and sad, but I continue to get back up with the goal of getting us to the finish line. I've come to terms with the fact that the only way out is through. I'm waving the white flag and I'm submitting. I'm going to give her 98% of what she wants. I'm sure none of us have the energy to fight anymore. The team, who is working their asses off, needs a shooting script on January 2nd, so here we are. There are a myriad of things I did to each scene. Some I made notes on and tiny ones I didn't. Most of what I touched on is below. The big issue is going to be intimacy and what we are shooting for those scenes, and how this script is going to be presented to her and with what notes. To that end, we all need to get on the phone and talk through it. At the risk of something innocuous or not meeting her standards, it could and would very likely be used against me, as it already has. So if you're in the middle of a process and trying to get things done, and by the way, this film, like Colleen's book, is pretty steamy. There's a lot of intimacy in this film, just like in the book. Now, the film doesn't even come close to how explicit the book is, and I say steamy sarcastically. When I was listening to the audiobook, my husband was like, "What are you listening to?" And I was like, "Yo, I don't know, okay?" But Blake didn't read the book, so she doesn't understand how sexually charged this whole story is. When you sign on for this type of movie, under normal circumstances, you'd have to understand that there's going to be conversation about sex and intimacy because it's a huge part of the film, and it was a huge part of the book. Given that, you're almost walking into a fire. He's walking into a fire and he knows that anything he says or does could potentially get him burned. There's really no way to get out of the fire without getting burned. What I still can't understand is her complaint states that after everything was implemented, after all her demands were met, filming continued without any incident, and there were no other problems on set. But then at the same time she claims that he sucked on her lip too long and rubbed his, and said she smelled good. We've all seen that video now, and we know she's lying about that, given the totality of everything we know. We know Lively wasn't signing her contract intentionally. It's wild to me that she was ever able to get on set and have access to things without a signed contract. She hadn't even signed a writer for her intimacy scenes yet, which almost feels like she's trying to escape being in breach of contract. It almost seems like she's 1 foot in and 1 foot out. That 1 foot in, 1 foot out approach would suggest that if she can't be there and get what she wants, she's out. So, if you don't want to sign a contract and don't want to be part of a film unless you get what you want, and you're pretending to be an A-lister with all these high demands, but you're not on an A-list path, you're not part of an A-list film, you're not part of an A-list budget, and you have more power because your husband has more influence in Hollywood, and you know that if you leave, you could potentially be on the hook for damages because you didn't fulfill what you said you would, and you're fearful of being held in breach of contract. A really good way to get out of that would be to develop allegations of sexual harassment. That way, if you quit and it's because of what you're claiming is sexual harassment that wasn't being addressed, you're not going to be worried about getting sued. You could just say, "Well, I left because of a hostile work environment, and since you didn't sign a contract, they can't sue you." At the same time, on the flip side, if she doesn't quit and gets what she wants, those same allegations can continue to be used as leverage to threaten him and get what she wants. If she did this, and if it appears that's what she did, this is disgusting. It's sinister, manipulative, and a way for her to either quit without getting in trouble or to take control of the whole movie, steal everything, and have the sequel with her and her husband becoming the mega couple. I see a lot of competition with Blake when it comes to her relationship with her husband. His career is going amazing and she's put most of her career on hold to raise the kids. Ryan's the kind of guy who likes to have a lot of control in relationships, so there's probably a dynamic here where she also wanted to compete and be the mogul like her husband and her friend Taylor. That also appears a lot in these texts. Her ego, her desire to be bigger than who she was, and more than what she was, using her celebrity to intimidate people and get what she wants. If this is all true, this is the most disgusting display I've ever seen. Allegations like this should never be used in this way. And when she makes statements like, "What he's doing is standard abusive tactics," it's actually her who's being the narcissist and the abuser here. She's making herself the victim when he's the one being victimized by her. She's gaslighting everyone and continuing to gaslight people. She's calling this whole thing we have right now a sideshow, but if her allegations had proof and had teeth, nothing he put out would ever discount that. He could put out all the evidence, and if her claims were true, all the evidence would show that's what happened. But they don't. It shows the opposite. Maybe she's Amber Heard 2.0, I don't know. But it's clear that he was terrified of her, and even though he was the quote-unquote employer, he had no power. It's honestly sad. It's disgusting, and I understand why everyone's invested in it. Am too. This power dynamic is gross, and this is happening in Hollywood. It's showing us a side of the industry that's disgusting and how PR machines work. Y'all, I know a lot about PR machines because of what I cover with cults, and we're almost seeing how Hollywood and the elite sphere work like a cult. If you don't do what they say, they're going to destroy you. It's pretty awful. I really hope as this moves forward we get more details and more information because I feel so bad for Justin. He deserves to be redeemed. He deserves all the justice he can get, and he deserves all $400 million at this point. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.